Okay, so today we're going to be learning how to factor. So factoring is basically undoing the distributive property. So it's kind of like the opposite of the distributive property. So we're going to practice factoring starting on page 488. Okay, so now we're on workbook page 488. We're going to practice factoring. So let's start with this example up here. So we have 3x plus 15. So if you notice, this looks like the answer to a distributive property problem. So what we're going to do is undo the distributive property. So when you have the distributive property, you're multiplying the number on the outside in. When you're factoring, you're dividing the number on the outside out. You're doing the opposite. Instead of multiplying in, you're dividing out. So if we have 3x plus 15, first we need to figure out what's the biggest number between 3 and 15 that they both can be divided by, because that's what we want to divide out. So we basically want to find their greatest common factor. So the greatest common factor between 3 and 15 is 3. So we're going to divide out a 3. So we're going to put it on the outside of a parenthesis. So now, dividing it out means we're going to divide it out from the 3x, and we're going to divide it out from the 5. So 3x divided by 3, the 3's cancel out, and we're just left with x. Plus 15 divided by 3 is 5. And then we can close the parentheses. So we divided out a 3, and what we were left with on the inside was x plus 5. So this would be our final answer after we factor. Okay, so let's go on to letter K. So we want to factor 16 plus 4x. So first we want to see what's the greatest common factor between 16 and 4. So what's the biggest number they both can be divided by? And the answer to that is 4. So we're going to divide out a 4. So I'm going to put it outside a set of parentheses. So now I'm going to divide this by 4 and this by 4. 16 divided by 4 is 4, plus 4x divided by 4. The 4's cancel out, and we're left with an x. So we can close the parentheses. So our final answer would be 4 parentheses 4 plus x. Now a way that you can always check your answer is if you were to distribute it back. So 4 times 4 is 16, plus 4 times x is 4x. Notice that you get the original problem. That's how you know that your answer is correct. Okay, so let's try the next one. We have to find the greatest common factor between 7 and 42. So the biggest number that these both can be divided by is 7. So I'm going to divide out a 7. So I'm going to put it outside a parenthesis. So I'm going to divide it from the 7x and the 42. So 7x divided by 7, the 7's cancel out, and we're left with x, plus 42 divided by 7 is 6. So then we can close the parentheses, and then we get our factored expression, 7 times x plus 6. Then just quickly check, 7 times x is 7x, 7 times 6 is 42, so we get our original expression, so this is correct. Okay, the next one, 36 and 30. The biggest number that goes into both of these would be 6. So I'm going to divide out a 6. So I'm going to put it outside the parentheses. So we're going to divide by 6, divide by 6. 36x divided by 6. Now 36 divided by 6 is 6. So we have 6 and we have the x. Those don't completely cancel out. Plus 30 divided by 6 is 5. Close parentheses. So our answer here is 6 times 6x plus 5. Okay, let's do number 6. So the greatest common factor between 4 and 40 is 4. So we can divide out of 4. So I'm going to divide this by 4 and divide this by 4. So 4x over 4, the 4's cancel out and we're just left with x plus 40 divided by 4 is 10. So the final answer would be 4 times x plus 10. So number 5 wants us to factor, but we only have numbers, but it's the same steps. So the greatest common factor between 25 and 60, or the biggest number that they both can be divided by, is 5. So I'm going to divide out of 5. So I'm left with 25 divided by 5 is 5, plus 60 divided by 5 is 12. And we would actually leave it like that because it's not asking us to solve it, it's asking us to factor it. One other type of factoring problem that you might come across, I'll do it at the top of the work zone, is if you have something like 4xy plus 2x. So we could find the greatest common factor between 4 and 2. So that would be 2. That's the biggest number that they both can be divided by. But notice how they both also have a letter in common. Because they both have a letter, that letter can also technically come out. Whereas the other problems we did, they didn't both have the same letter, so we didn't take out any letter. But this problem, they do both share a letter in common. So that can come out with the greatest common factor. So now, if I'm dividing this by 2, and I also took out the x. So first let's divide by 2. So 4 divided by 2 would leave me with 2. But I also took out an x, so that would get rid of this x and this x. So I'd be left with 4 divided by 2, and I'd be left with y. Plus 2 divided by 2 is 1. And again, we took out the x. So I would be left with 2x times 2y plus 1. You probably won't see many problems like that, but just in case, that's an example of one.